Tonight, I'm talking with actor and writer Jonny Lewis from the States. How are you?
I'm good, Sharif. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for joining our discussion about the current status of filmmaking around the world. And we would like to speak about your work, especially in comedy and short films. But first, let me know a little bit about your early life before venturing into acting and showbiz.
Okay, well, before I started acting, I used to publish scientific books
Yes.
about the environment, and it was a small family business, and I didn't really even think I had any creativity. My son is very creative, and I didn't see that I had that.
Yes. So, did you take any acting lessons? How did it happen?
How it happened was I met someone on a train who was a theater director in New York City.
Yeah.
And I had just moved to New York City thinking that I would be able to get a job in book publishing because there's a lot of book publishing in New York City. And this young man invited me to come to an audition just to watch. And I thought, well, that will be fun. So I went there, and it was a fascinating process to watch, to see why they accepted people, and especially why they rejected certain people. There are so many reasons to reject a person who might be a great actor or might have the perfect look for the part, but there are so many other reasons why they might not really be good for the role. And when they finished all these auditions, there was one role that they hadn't filled. So the theater director turned to me and he says, "Hey, Johnny, why don't you try it?" And I said, "You're joking, right? I'm not an actor." And he said, "No, try it." And so I tried it, and I got the part. And this was not a full play, it was a play reading.
Yes.
Which is really good for me because I would have been really nervous in a real play. But I had this experience of doing this play reading, and it was so much fun. And then I started getting cast in some more play readings, and within a couple of months I got cast in the male lead in a play at that theater. And partly it was probably because everybody else in that theater was under 30, except for maybe one or two people. And I was 45. So I'm looking pretty good to play the older guy. And I just fell in love with acting, and I said, okay, this is what I want to do now. I did take a couple classes after I started acting, but within a couple months I was so busy working in short films in New York and getting cast in off-Broadway plays that I didn't have time to take any more classes.
Yes. Yes. Do you remember the name of the play and your role in that play? You remember the name of the play?
Yeah, it was one of those little plays where you have more than one role. And my main role was an acting teacher, which I find pretty ironic. A guy who would, and I had never even acted in high school or grade school, nothing, zero acting. And here I am playing a teacher of acting. The other two roles, there was one brief scene where I played a doctor and one delivering a baby. And there was one brief scene where I played a priest, but most of it was the acting teacher.
Yes. Before I asked you about the following stage of your acting career, since you told me that you worked in publishing and in science fiction or science books, correct?
Science books.
Science book. Do you think this COVID thing is some kind of sci-fi You know, it's unbelievable.
Oh, you know, there are definitely stories that could be written about it, or that could be written about the next virus
Yes,
that comes in, you know, 10 years from now or whenever.
yeah.
Uh, but I myself prefer to write on other topics. I'm sure we will see a bunch of films about this.
Course, because you know, I discovered that many writers predicted something like COVID would happen 10 years ago, and they predicted, you know, in some U.S. writers, you know, predicted it in some books. It predicted not the name COVID, but something similar, like a worldwide pandemic like that. You know, so it's very strange.
Yeah, yeah. I, I, I've seen that also. And then there were even a couple of movies about it.
Of course, and of course, a lot of films. But the play where you started, it was like an off-Broadway, correct? It was an off.
Two offs, off.
Two, yes, because,
And again, it was really the woman in the play had the bigger role.
yes,
I was the male lead, but I'm glad she had the bigger role because I was scared to death every single time. but I also really loved it every single time.
yes. And I remember going to, when I was in New York, to an off-Broadway presentation. And of course, compared to the big Broadway, you know, theater houses, sometimes the theater itself is very small. It's like a garage or like a very, very small space like that, you know, and you are very close to the actor, you know, but it is a very intimate space, I mean, you know, for the audience. For the audience as well is a very special experience seeing an off-Broadway presentation, right?
Yeah, it is. Our theater had about 60 seats, maybe 66.
Yeah,
And when I visit New York, I I go to like a play every day, or maybe two plays. If it's a weekend, I can catch a matinee.
yeah.
And I usually prefer the off Broadway
Mhm,
and the off Broadway.
mhm.
I do sometimes go to the Broadway plays, but I love the intimacy of a smaller play. And also, the smaller plays can be more daring about what they write about.
Yes,
They can have more interesting topics and more interesting messages and more interesting ideas to present to the world
mm,
than a Broadway play, which has to sometimes try to please the greatest number of audience.
yes,
Now that's not always true because plays like Hamilton change all that.
yes,
But I really do appreciate the smaller plays.
yes. Right now, you kind of specialized in comedies, and also there is a bunch of anti-war comedy, and I can see the names, you know, of some of the films, you know, they are like a spoof, you know, of films we know, you know, like here is your flag, here is your flag, for instance. It's like, you know, based on flags of our fathers, maybe, huh?
Um, no, it's not. The one that's a definite spoof is "We Saved Private Ryan."
Of course, that is obvious.
Yeah, yeah. But no, the I haven't seen Flags of Our Fathers.
Yes.
Um, but no, that was just based on the idea of when someone enlists in the military,
Uh-huh.
at least in this country, um, often, usually, the family says, "Hey, good for you." And it occurred to me that when you enlist in the military, you're signing up for a job where people are going to try to kill you.
Mhm.
So it's not like even the police or the fire department where you might get killed.
Mhm.
In the army, people are actually absolutely trying to kill you.
Mhm.
That's
Yes.
their job. Your job is to kill them. Their job is to kill you. And so if your family says, "Hey, good for you for this job," they're ignoring the fact that you're job description puts you in mortal danger.
Yeah.
So it's kind of exploring that topic because we never think about that, but it's true.
Yes, and you know, it's very strange that a lot of you know, very good comedies, you know, were anti-war black comedies. You know, if you remember, I'm speaking about the mainstream films like Catch 22. You know, these kind of classics. You know, many films were done about Vietnam. Many television series as well. You know, do you think it's easy for comedy to criticize war and criticize violence, you know, or it's very difficult to mix the two? Because usually stories of war not only it does not only contain heroic stuff, but very melodramatic stuff, you know, very human stories, you know. And what do you think?
Um, yeah, I actually one of the films I'm writing now it's the story of my chiropractor who was an army medic in the Iraq War. And I had in mind to write a story about war and the absurdity of war. And when I would visit him, he would tell me these crazy stories. And so we sat down one day, and for 2.5 hours, he told me his whole story about his time in the Army, from the day of his enlistment to the day of his discharge. And it was really interesting. And there were some sad or dangerous parts, but most of it was just absurd and crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like when his vehicle broke down in the desert on a training exercise, and the lieutenant said, "You stay with your vehicle, we'll be right back for you." Well, they didn't come right back. And they didn't come right back the next day or the next day. Yes. They came back 4 days later.
Yeah.
And the military has this motto of no man left behind. Yeah. They left him behind for 4 days.
Yeah.
And this is just his true story. Mm-hmm. So I have 105 pages, my first draft. I'm going to sit down with him and polish that. And I didn't have to invent anything. It's all his stories. I did invent the dialogue. I invented the way in which things took place sometimes, but the actual events are all his stories.
Yes.
And so it's not an anti-war story, mm-hmm. but it's a story about, I think, about what the truth of what war is. And I think some people will look at it and say, wow, this is heroic. I want to join the Army. And other people will look at it and say, this is crazy. How do we let this type of thing continue? But it's my opportunity to show the truth of war, and I'm good at writing comedy, so I think it's going to be a fun film to watch, but there are also some very deep messages, but I'm not putting the messages there.
Yeah.
The messages are just already there from the truth of his experience.
Yeah, but it will be a long film, not a short.
Yeah. I'm mostly working on full-length films right now.
Good.
I did get one idea for a short film in Japanese that I can star in and shoot in Japan. So I went ahead and wrote that. I had my Japanese tutor translate it for me, and we laugh every time we read through it. And so that will sort of be my practice run for my full-length film that I will also be shooting in Japanese in Japan.
Excellent. And right now, I have seen that you've been all around the world with your films. in different festivals and of course in different countries. So tell me how these films were received by the international audience, because obviously you are criticizing many wars where America have been before. And of course, we know about the war films, that big studios in Hollywood produce, and they go worldwide. They everybody have seen them, since the beginning of cinema, So, how do you see the audience reflecting on your own works? Because you present war from a different angle.
Well, we have been in a lot of festivals, and I think that shows that a lot of people appreciate that different angle.
Mm-hmm.
My films generally criticize or point out the absurdity of war,
Mm-hmm.
but since the United States is a major, I'm not sure what word to use here. Since the United States is involved in most of the big wars these days,
Yeah.
my films are often
Major player. Major player.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My films are often a critique of the United States.
Yeah.
And I think people in other countries especially appreciate these because they see the United States as the bully of the world, and they're glad to see that at least one American citizen is sane enough to remark on it.
Have you seen, for instance, the Hot Shots series? And do you like this kind of comedy? This very slapstick with the Abraham Zucker. Hot Shots 1 and 2.
Oh, I love that stuff. Sharif, I absolutely love that stuff. The airplane movies, the Hot Shots, the what's the one? The police, Naked Gun.
Yes.
Yeah,
Gun, of course.
I love that stuff. Yeah.
There is also an early film with Bill Murray. He was in the army as well. Maybe you have seen it. I need to remember this one. It was very famous. Bill Murray and John Candy.
Yeah. I haven't seen that one. It was called Stripes.
Yeah, Stripes, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Bill Murray, that sort of humor was maybe a different kind of silliness than the kind of silliness that I liked.
Yes. And right now, about currently your script, do you have right now finance resources, or you will start seeking them after you finish the script?
In the past, one of the reasons I wrote short films was I wanted to write according to my resources.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I wanted to write a film that I could shoot. Mm-hmm. I wanted to write a film that I could find a location for. I wanted to find a film that I could finance. I wanted to write a film that had a small number of actors so I could afford to do it. But this year, the sky's the limit. I'm just writing whatever comes to me and whatever I feel like writing, and I'm not worrying about the money. I believe that the money will come later on. Also, I'm writing 4 comedies right now. Most of them are more than halfway finished with the first draft. One has a first draft finished. The one with the least pages has 34 pages. And I believe that once I can get something going with one film, then I'll be able to tell my producer, hey, I have 3 other comedies. because when I was publishing scientific books, when an author came to us with a good book, we were excited. When an author came to us with one good book and told us he was working on 3 other books, we were very excited.
Yes. And about your Japanese film, you will travel also to Japan to make it?
Yes.
Yes. It's a short film or a feature? Short?
There's a short one first, and then there's a feature which has 34 pages. And that one I actually started writing first. I didn't have the opportunity to travel to most of the festivals that my films showed in, but I did go last year to one in Woodstock, New York, and I met a Japanese filmmaker who had a wonderful, lovely short film in that festival, and we became friends. And my son lives in Japan, and he married a Japanese lady, and I have 3 grandkids who are half Japanese, and I go there 3 times a year.
Excellent.
I stay for about 10 days. So I have a fair amount of experience in the Japanese culture, and especially at least in my Japanese family. And my Japanese family is an extended family. So my grandchildren's Japanese grandmother and their Japanese uncle and their Japanese aunts have sort of become my extended Japanese family. And I really enjoy those trips. I love the culture. I love the people. I'm learning the language. I know a large number of the 2,000 Japanese characters that they use. So an idea for a film just came up based on my experiences.
Yes. Yes, of course, they have a very beautiful history, heritage, and as well contemporary, their cinema, their animation, are very creative in Japan.
Oh, I'm a big fan of Miyazaki.
Yes, yes. So I'm very happy that we have this discussion with you, Mr. Jonny Lewis. And I hope next year we can see your new films, We can meet in one of the festival, seeing the films together.
That would be wonderful, Sharif.
And let's keep in touch. And of course, I will be very, very happy to share your links. I have your site and the YouTube channel featuring your shorts and the website as well about your shorts. So
thank you.
I hope more people can discover your work worldwide.
Well, thank you. I appreciate what you're doing for filmmakers on your site. I have an idea for a film I want to shoot in Mexico based on my experience when I lived there for 3 years.
Yes.
And someday I want to shoot a film in French, whether it's in France or West Africa or North Africa, I'm not sure, but I'm working on my French all the time to make that happen. And I think it's very exciting that part of what you're doing is fostering communication between filmmakers in different countries.
Of course.
Because Hollywood's not the only place to make films. I enjoy Hollywood films, but I also enjoy films from every other place, and I'm very excited about the future of international filmmaking.
Of course, and I know that in the upcoming months, a lot of changes are happening, but at least creativity didn't stop, and many filmmakers are writing or making preparation for new works. Also, from other artists I speak to, a lot of people would like to go back to theater, to museums, so the creativity wouldn't stop.